Hey, good morning, everyone. Happy weekend to you. Josh, of severe weather, more severe weather in the forecast here in the southern United States. We just cannot catch a break. We are looking at yet another potentially destructive complex of thunderstorms. And I'm going to go ahead and spend most of my video talking about that, and then we'll talk a little bit about tropics as well. Another destructive complex of storms set to get fired up here very late in the day today over portions of Colorado, Kansas, and basically the high plains is expected to race east-southeastward tonight and continue tomorrow into parts of the Gulf South. Same places that have been getting hit are going to get hit once again here. There will be the threat for a couple tornadoes, but primarily strong winds, perhaps to 80 miles per hour, and in some places some giant hail as well. And even in the yellow area, that will be a problem. So please do not be off your guard this weekend. Be prepared for what's going to be more rough weather, especially tonight into the first part of tomorrow across the center of the region I've got here. Now, here's a look at what this past week showed us. We started off with some active weather on Monday, some wind reports in the deep south, so a lot of hail in the Dallas area and back across the southern high plains. Tuesday, we saw a lot of hail as well in the Dallas area and on east, and severe winds across parts of Georgia, Florida, and Alabama. Then Wednesday, we got going with what appeared to be potentially close to being a derecho, but certainly a strong complex of storms that produced widespread wind damage from Texas down to Florida and across Mississippi and Alabama. We had some tornadoes as well in Alabama and Georgia, and some very large hail over parts of Mississippi. In fact, maybe record-breaking hail, but that wasn't it. Thursday, we had a derecho that started in Kansas and Oklahoma, and then that raced all the way into Mississippi early in the day yesterday. Out ahead of it, there was severe weather over Florida as well as parts of the southeast and into parts of the Lake Erie region. And yesterday, we saw that derecho continue into Alabama and Florida and gradually weaken south and east of Tallahassee. We had additional storms last night, produced some severe hail. We also had severe weather over parts of the Mid-Atlantic region around the Philadelphia area and across parts of Virginia and even into North Carolina. Although where I live in Raleigh, we did escape getting any rain once again, just another beaten drum. But here is a look at the outlook for today, and we have once again an enhanced risk over a good chunk of Oklahoma, and that also includes, unfortunately, Perryton, Texas, which got hit with that strong tornado the other day. We also have that continuing into Arkansas and southern parts of Kansas. But surrounding that, we do have severe weather potential all the way into probably 2/3 of the state of Florida here today into this evening, and marginal risk up to Omaha, where they're playing the College World Series. So a lot of people under the gun, but I'm most concerned about the central part of this region as we get into the evening hours. We've got over 4 million people that are in that enhanced risk for severe weather. That's level 3 out of 5. Around that, 32 million people in a slight risk and 22 million people in a marginal risk. So all in all, we're going to see close to 60 million people at risk for severe weather in the next 24 hours. A 5% chance for tornadoes as well over northwestern Oklahoma and some surrounding states as well. 2% risk over the eastern Gulf states, including the Tampa Bay area, and a 2% risk all the way over to Tulsa and back into southeast Colorado. But wind is going to be the bigger concern, I think, with over 3 million people at risk of seeing wind gusts over 74 miles per hour, perhaps into the 80s. And once again, Oklahoma City is in this risk. We saw severe winds of 84 miles per hour the other night. We could see that again here tonight. Tulsa's in the risk. Liberal, Kansas, all the way up to about Dodge City. Surrounding that area, a risk for any of these storms that could produce some severe wind all the way into Florida and back to Colorado. So Colorado to Florida, a very large chunk of the U.S. is again going to be under the gun here for severe wind. There could also be some very big hail as this complex starts in Colorado and continues right on into Oklahoma and southern Kansas, just south of Wichita. Still a threat for some large hail as well over parts of central Texas and over the central Gulf Coast states. As we get to the day tomorrow, we continue this enhanced risk. This will be ongoing from the storms that are going to be moving in. That includes Little Rock, Jackson, Mississippi, Shreveport, Monroe, Marksville, Macomb, Mobile, Alabama, maybe all the way to Biloxi. About 5 million people in that enhanced risk for tomorrow. So it's going to be a stormy Father's Day for some of you, especially in the morning hours here, but perhaps again, additional storms in the afternoon. In fact, over 30 million people will be at risk of severe weather, which includes portions of Florida and goes all the way up into the Ozarks region of Missouri. Things are going to stay somewhat active next week, but we are going to see the wind flow aloft slowing down some. That should calm the extreme amounts of wind and hail we've been seeing, but we are still going to potentially have some flash flooding. We're going to potentially have some severe winds, some nasty storms here early next week. This is Monday, and you can see from Louisiana to Georgia and Tallahassee, we do have a marginal risk. We could start seeing more active weather over the north central and northwestern parts of the U.S., but generally speaking, we're back to a more typical pattern for late June as we get to next week. So that is, I guess, some good news for us. It doesn't mean we're going to escape any rough storms. It just means we're probably done with any threats for any derechos or any kind of mesoscale convective systems that will produce bowing wind segments that produce those damaging winds. So yeah, very busy stretch of weather coming up here over the next few days. The GFS model shows us that we've got a big block in place over the Northeast. A storm will be leaving this weekend, and we'll see quieter weather in the Northeast. But we've got our storm complexes continuing to move south and east into Florida right on into Tuesday. And what's going to happen is we're going to see low pressure cutting off here, producing a very moist pattern over the Southeast, just very stagnant, where it's going to be really hot over Texas. Air mass thunderstorms will pop up over the Gulf states, and we're just going to have soaking rain over portions of northern Florida, Georgia, into the Carolinas, and that includes Tennessee, by the way. Meanwhile, most of the stronger storms for the second half of next week are going to be up and over along a boundary here that goes from Colorado and western Kansas up into central Canada. Eastern Canada, though, is going to warm up pretty quickly, and we're going to potentially see more wildfire activity and more smoke that does unfortunately get pushed southward here. You can see these red lines that are moving kind of southwestward. So there will be the threat for some wildfire smoke moving back into the eastern Great Lakes region, maybe into the Northeast. I don't think it's going to look like it did here a couple weeks ago, but nonetheless, there could certainly be some air pollution, some lower air quality out of this. But the Southeast is going to see just a really lousy week, unfortunately. Lots of rain for Florida, maybe even a weak surface low gets going here over the eastern Gulf. Probably nothing major at that point. Just going to look really wet. Next weekend could stay pretty wet in the Carolinas, Tennessee, Georgia. Just not the best weather, unfortunately, across this part of the country. We're trading in extreme thunderstorms with just slow-moving, drenching thunderstorms and just soaking rain. So it's like pick your poison here in the Southeast. Meanwhile, in the Northeast, we are going to have pretty much a wall-to-wall dry week, so drought conditions are likely to spread. Even into the upper Midwest, the Great Lakes region, not a lot of rain expected. So the areas that do need the rain are not going to see it, and the areas that don't need the rain are going to see it. Meanwhile, the Southwest, Texas, are not going to see any kind of monsoonal moisture, just going to be pretty darn hot, while the West, especially the Northwest, will be cooler with the onshore flow and more cloud cover in place. Let's take a look at the upper level pattern. You can see this is the 300 millibar jet stream. Still very fast winds moving across. You have this disturbance here overnight tonight, bringing very fast flow across Texas, Oklahoma, and into the Southeast. The good news is behind this, we see quieter wind flow aloft early next week. The bad news is that we have an upper low that's going to get stuck here next week, and where it goes is going to be somewhat uncertain. But all of the intense wind goes across central Canada, and our best chance for severe weather is going to be up in here. Going to be hot down in here under the high pressure ridge and unsettled here over the Southeast. Just a very, we call this kind of an omega block where you could see trough here, and then an upper level low gets stuck underneath it. So very interesting setup here in the coming days. Here's a look at the HRRR model, and I'm going to show you our complex of storms. These are where the strongest winds are going to start off here, and this is 7 o'clock Eastern time, so 6 o'clock Central. You'll see these brighter colors. You can see advancing here, not really quite a derecho, but certainly a widespread complex of storms. And this will continue and move in kind of in two directions, one across the Ozarks and the other across Northeast Texas into Louisiana. So it kind of splits off. You get a fork in the road, but you have destructive winds here and destructive winds here. And this will be 7 a.m. Central tomorrow morning, continuing into western Florida. So very clear that we see another large region that is under the gun for severe winds, and the potential for wind gusts maybe over 100 miles per hour, according to the HRRR model. So very intense. Here's a look at the complex as it moves across the Arklatex overnight tonight. This is midnight Central, and then lower Arkansas, northern parts of Louisiana do have the potential for wind gusts that may get up to close to 100 miles per hour. So maybe not a derecho, but still very intense winds are possible according to this model. You'll definitely want to have multiple ways of getting a warning overnight tonight, as these could be destructive storms once again in the same exact places that have already seen severe weather. And I know it doesn't sound fair, it's pretty cruel and unusual, but this is just kind of the pattern we're stuck in here. But things should improve after we get past Father's Day. Here's the forecast reflectivity. This is where storms are going to be popping up here throughout the heating of the day. This is around 4 o'clock Central Time. You'll see activity across central Texas, activity across Oklahoma and Kansas in the far west, and then everything races off to the east-southeast. Multiple Boeing segments here, multiple areas of destructive wind, maybe a few tornadoes and large hail. And this is tomorrow morning around 9 o'clock Central, and we'll have additional severe weather over parts of southern Arkansas, moving into the Mississippi, and hopefully weakening at that point. But very active. And then tomorrow evening, additional storms over Texas, Louisiana, and parts of the deep south here through tomorrow evening. Here's a look at the southeast, and you'll see Florida's going to have active weather today as storms race across the Gulf and then regenerate over the southern and central peninsula. Additional storms over northern Florida here late in the day today, as well as southern parts of Mississippi, Alabama, and Georgia. Quiet across the Carolinas and Tennessee today, so it should be a pretty nice day here. Next wave of storms moves in here overnight tonight. Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, racing east-southeastward into Alabama around 7, 8 in the morning tomorrow. Additional storms will follow it and weaken some, and along this boundary of storms, we still have to keep an eye out for portions of Florida. We could see a few pop-ups as well later in the day tomorrow over parts of Georgia and South Carolina. I don't think anything widespread severe. And then another wave of potentially severe storms here comes tomorrow night. After that, we're going to see, I don't want to say zero severe weather, but a more typical pattern as we get into Monday, the 20th or 19th of June, Juneteenth. Here's a look at the maximum updraft helicity. This tracks where the storms could be most intense, where there's some rotation in the atmosphere. You can see here tonight over Colorado, Oklahoma, and parts of central Texas. Here's where everything advances, and you can kind of see where the path of potential destruction may be. So Oklahoma down to the Arklatex, right along the Red River here, central Texas, East Texas, northern Louisiana, and then right on into western Florida. And here's a look in the southeast as well, at kind of the same variable that I showed you. And again, the exact same path right along our boundary, right down into Florida. We have the potential for some rotating updrafts, for some large hail and some intense wind. And there could be a tornado or two as well. Let's look at the Northeast real quick. We're going to see a quieter day as far as severe weather, but it will still be wet today, especially this morning over New Hampshire, eastern Mass, over Maine. We could see a few heavier cells as well on the southern tier of this here later this morning into the afternoon from New York into Massachusetts. As we get to tonight, we will see some gradual improvement from Long Island and from the Hudson River on westward. It'll still be wet, though, across southeast Quebec, over New Brunswick, over northern Maine. And then on Father's Day, we will see rain mostly in the morning and early afternoon over Maine. But fortunately, it looks like a much quieter pattern, just maybe a few quick sprinkles or maybe an isolated thunder cell. But overall, a quieter day here for Father's Day. Rainfall amounts here over the next several days, it's going to pile up quickly here across the prairies of Canada. It's going to pile up over the central and southern plains, and unfortunately the southeast here is going to get just completely dumped on here with extreme amounts of heavy rain. This is a blend of all of the models over the next 10 days, and you can see amounts that could get well over 6 inches, perhaps 8, 9 inches over the Gulf Coast of Florida here, 8 inches over southeast Florida, 3 to 6 over Georgia and Alabama. The upslope areas here of the Blue Ridge, the Pisgah Forest, 7 inches in Spartanburg, maybe 8, maybe even a foot of rain here somewhere around Brevard, Pisgah Forest. And we'll see this heavy rain as well starting to pile up in the Carolinas. We do need it across the Raleigh area and Wilmington, but we could have some heavy rain. Farther west, things are gradually going to improve here next week, and typical amounts of rain are going to be expected. We'll talk tropics real fast for you. We're in an El Nino. We've been stable at 0.7 of a degree Celsius above average. So that is across the central parts of the Pacific. The Atlantic waters continue to run much hotter than average. These water temperatures are more what you would see towards the heart of the hurricane season in August. Notice, though, we are running below average here along the eastern seaboard, except New England. So some signs of El Nino here, but just because we're below average doesn't mean we can't support tropical systems. It just means we're below average. So not the entire basin is running hot, what you might read in the news. There are definitely differences that we're tracking here. But the Gulf, the Caribbean are running above average. But I'm most likely going to be talking about activity out in here where water temperatures support tropical development. We've got the red area here. This is a 70% chance of development over the next week. You'll see there's a bit of a right bend here. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more, but we could have a tropical storm by, say, Monday or Tuesday of next week over the central Atlantic, and that is just almost unheard of this time of the year. This possibly could be even a hurricane, depending on what happens with it. The upper level pattern does feature a low amount of wind shear and high amounts of moisture here between the Atlantic, or between the central Atlantic and Africa, whereas we've got a large area of high pressure in here. You can see we've got strong wind shear over the Gulf and a flare up with the gyre over Central America, but no immediate threats here in the Gulf or the Caribbean. Here's our wave coming off of Africa. There's actually another one behind it, about 4 days behind it. This is the one that's forecast to develop. We'll have to watch the one behind it as well. Could be a bit slower to develop, but we definitely have a light bit of a spin here and low amounts of wind shear. These are the Cape Verde Islands here. This is our wave. It's down at about 10 north. So it's going to be a low rider for a little while here. And you can see on the GFS model, we have some development coming later tomorrow, and by Monday, potentially a depression or even a tropical storm. This is the middle of next week. You can see that this trough here over the central Atlantic is going to try to bend the system northward. If it develops, it's going to feel that trough. If it takes its time developing, it may miss that trough. So there's kind of two potential tracks here. The GFS in typical fashion makes this thing a hurricane. We'll see. I mean, certainly it's possible. The waters are warm enough, the wind shear is low enough, we could have a hurricane. But fortunately, the GFS keeps it east of Bermuda. That's this little dot right here, and takes it out to sea here at the end of the month. So you can see behind it, there's also another wave that could become a depression or a weak storm, but the GFS kind of loses that potential for development. It does have something in the eastern Gulf. It's still trying to make something happen here at the end of the week. There's an upper low, so the wind shear is going to be strong. Could we see a weak system? Maybe. I think maybe the bigger story is just the moisture that's going to hit Florida and surrounding states here. Here's a look at the upper level pattern on the GFS. This is our disturbance, which will likely be a tropical storm at this point. This is next Tuesday night. You can see there's a region of high pressure that's building aloft over it. But as we get later into the week, that high pressure region breaks down. We do have a trough that swings through. The stronger the storm system, the more likely it's going to get tugged northward by this trough. The weaker the system is, the less likely it feels the upper level trough, and it gets steered by lower level winds. And that would keep it more on a westerly trajectory towards the islands here. And the GFS, while it shows that trough picking it up, other models are not. This is the European. And you can see here, as we get through the middle of the week, it keeps the system on a low latitude track here. It doesn't take it this way. It takes it this way towards the islands. This is Wednesday, Thursday, and Thursday night. It has it moving through the Leeward Islands as a weaker system. And oh, by the way, the system right behind it is going to try to catch up to it here. The good news is if it takes this track, the winds become more hostile aloft. And we also deal with land masses here. It's bad news for Haiti and Hispaniola, but good news for those of us in the U.S. is that we will more than likely not have a system that can hold its own by the time it tries to get towards Cuba. Well, we'll keep an eye on that. It's 10 days away. A lot can change between now and then. You can see this is the upper level pattern on the GFS. And because it does not strengthen the storm system as quickly, it actually builds a ridge over it. It will keep it on a westerly track. You can see this upper level low here produces a little bit more wind shear as this system moves through the islands. And we just have a remnant circulation at this point that has a very low chance of staying developed at that point. The icon model, this is the German model, by the way. It follows the suit of the European, where it does have a weak system moving through the islands and then the system behind it. But this is just like the European, where we've got something that dies here over the Central Caribbean near Haiti and Dominican Republic, and something else to watch, which will more than likely do the exact same thing. The ensemble shows our chance for tropical depression development. And again, it shows most likely it's moving through the islands, possibly turning right. Here are the tropical storm probabilities. It does have a decent chance this will become a tropical storm. And then it does not show a hurricane chance like the GFS. Here are all the ensemble tracks. More than half of them take it in this direction, but you can see it's very weak at this point. There are some, though, that recurve it off to the north. So either we have a weak system that is going to be a rainmaker in the Caribbean, or we have a stronger system that is going to avoid Bermuda and recurve off to the east, both of which are good news for us here in the United States, by the way. And accumulated maximum wind gusts, this is non-tropical, but this is where our system might be. And you can see the control of the European has backed off from yesterday's model runs. This was yesterday. I don't know why it did that on me. But this was yesterday, and you could see a stronger storm system. And then this is today, and a weaker system farther south. Good news for us here in the U.S. And you can see here's the rain as well, and it mainly turns it northeast and then keeps it in this direction as well. Very wet, by the way, here in the next 15 days. We've got anomalies of 14 inches above normal, potentially here, or above average, and somewhere in the southeast. So very insane weather if you think about it. But anyway, I'm so glad you guys had a chance to watch today. I really do pray over the safety of those of you in the south and east. These are nasty storms. I grew up in Louisiana. I see a lot of storms in the summer down there, but nothing like this. This has just been just kind of extreme for the month of June. But I'll have more videos coming up for you guys here next week. For those of you who are dads, happy Father's Day to you. And if you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing. Real quick, I want to give all the credit to my heavenly maker, God, through his son, Jesus Christ. As a Christian man, I've been called to do this. This is my calling to serve you guys, to serve the kingdom by helping you stay safe and be prepared for what could happen here with the weather. Jesus has meant a lot to me over the last 10 years of my life. I've been kind of given a new lease on life. For the first 30 years of my life, I was not a believer. I was very much a scientist, which I still am, but I did not believe that God created the earth. Well, things have changed. The door opened for me. I found some light in the darkness of my life. I had a lot of insecurities, and now more and more I continue to grow in the grace of God. I wanted to read a quick verse for you guys here, give you a little bit of spiritual guidance here. Acts 2:16. But this is what was spoken by the prophet Joel. And it shall come to pass in the last days, saith God, I will pour out of my spirit upon all flesh, and your sons and your daughters shall prophesy, and your young men shall see visions, and your old men shall dream dreams. And on my servants and on my handmaidens I will pour out in those days of my spirit, and they shall prophesy. And I will shew wonders in heaven above, and signs in the earth beneath, blood and fire and vapor of smoke. The sun shall be turned into darkness, and the moon into blood, before the great and notable day of the Lord come. And it shall come to pass that whoever shall call on the name of the Lord shall be saved. Jesus is coming again, folks. We don't know when, but he is coming. These words I do not take lightly. You've got the opportunity to accept Jesus Christ as your personal Savior, and you will be saved when that dark day comes. If it's not you, it's generations behind you. But this is the time where we can repent and turn to God. And we can see Jesus Christ in all of his mighty power. The same power that God gave him, he gave us. And I really appreciate this gift. And it is good news to me, not that the earth will be coming to an end, which was spoken by Joel, but that we will be saved if we so choose to be. So I really pray that that is you. If it is not, no judgment, no harsh judgment. That's not who I am. But for those of you who are believers, obviously, you know exactly what I'm talking about, but you need encouragement just like I do as well. And I'm happy to pray for any of you, and I would love it if you could pray for me as well as we continue to succeed in helping save people's lives and helping to spread the good word. Thank you all so much. I hope you have a great weekend. Happy Father's Day, and we'll catch you again here early next week. God bless you.